Hi everybody, it's Shaftman from Shaftman TV. I hope everybody's well, and today we're going to look at Monarch Airlines insolvency and what investors can learn from that insolvency. Now unfortunately Monarch Airways have become insolvent and filed for bankruptcy this week. Unfortunately 3,000 people have lost their jobs and a few 100,000 passengers have been stranded abroad, which is a very unfortunate circumstance, obviously. But this collapse of the airline comes after Alitalia had bankruptcy issues and Air Berlin also having bankruptcy issues. So in order to understand why this happens, we need to understand the nature of airline stocks and airlines in general, and how airlines expand and how they meet demand and all those other things. But in terms of Monarch, obviously the terrorist attacks in Tunisia, Egypt, Turkey didn't help them at all, because these were massive destinations for Monarch, and demand quite obviously has nosedived in those areas. Also, if you read the statement from their CEO, you'll see that he mentions overcapacity, where there is a prevalence and a price war, a prevalence of seats and a price war also happening inside of the budget airline industry. So generally speaking, what can investors learn from Monarch's demise? So if we look first on the demand side, we'll see that when incomes fall, we have to consider something called income demand elasticity. Now, changes in income upon demand for a product are reflected by a coefficient. So for example, every 1% that incomes drop, then demand for each product will react in different ways. Equally, when incomes rise by 1%, demand from certain products are going to act in certain ways. Now, in terms of airlines, the income demand elasticity is around 6. Okay, so every 1% the income drops, the actual demand for airlines drops by 6%. The complete opposite end of the scale, a more stable product, is going to be food. So food has got a coefficient of about 0.14. So it means that every sort of 1% that incomes drop, the demand for food will only drop 0.14%, which isn't very much. So there's more stability there within food than there are for airlines. So the income demand elasticity is something which is really important to consider. And this is something which has been brought forward by the CEO of Monarch, which has said that since Brexit, they have seen a downturn generally also in spending, and the actual revenue that Monarch have taken. So that's the demand side. What about the supply side? Now, in order to understand the supply side, there's one further point I must make, and that is that where incomes go down by 1%, that's also reflected when incomes go up by 1%. So on the flip side, when incomes go up, you can see air travel rises by 6% approximately for every 1% of income. Every 1% that income goes up. So on the supply side, when demand increases, you have airlines that add capacity. Okay? And when they expand too rapidly or with too much leverage and too much debt, then there is overcapacity. And with overcapacity, where airlines can't fill seats, that's where you see airlines slashing prices. And competitors are forced to follow suit. And this is essentially, if you read the financial press, you would hear continually that there's overcapacity in budget airlines in airlines, and this is what they mean, that you have these very expensive planes which airlines look to fill, and you'll see classic examples of Ryanair. I recently visited Rome. It was £40 return from Manchester to Rome, £40 return. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the point is that those players, those airlines in the industry that aren't strong enough, that have too much debt, that aren't managing their expenses, have got too many costs, will go out of business, as shown by Alitalia, Air Berlin, and unfortunately Monarch as well. So this feeds into a final point of why large investors like Warren Buffett historically have avoided airline stocks. Now recently, I believe he's made a major investment in an airline, but generally speaking, airlines are very, very, very difficult stocks to pick and to understand, and also to make money from. There is a statistic which is doing the rounds, and I've read this a few times, and I don't have a source for this, but the stat is that if you take all airlines from say 1900 to today, and you add up all their earnings and all the losses, it'd be a massive, huge net loss. And Buffett obviously sometime has made a joke, that at Kitty Hawk, where the Wright brothers were developing the first plane, he said that if a capitalist was there, a capitalist should have shot down that first plane, because airlines and airline stocks have been terrible investments for investors. So I hope that's been useful. I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. I appreciate any comments, any feedback, and I appreciate you even watching the videos. So I'm Shaftman from Shaftman TV, and I wish you a fantastic evening. Thank you. Thanks.